Hello and welcome to the QMobile Setup Admin review. When you first log into your Setup Admin, you'll come to the dashboard. You want to go down to Q settings. In here, you'll see where you can add your logo. We usually recommend no bigger than 250 by 250 pixels. I recommend reading the guidelines for messaging. One important thing to know is that apostrophes, quotes, and dollar signs you really can't use with the system or it won't send messages. It reads it as code. And you have a 160 character limit, and the system will stop you at 160 characters. Just have to be cautious if you use if you try to personalize it with the name code. You just want to leave at least 15 characters left. So let's say 148 characters or so. So your first message is what we call your opt-in wait message. And this message is designed to confirm for the customer that they're in the proper queue and the position they're in the queue. In other words, what number in line. And they also have the option to use reply commands going forward. So in this case, they can reply L to leave. You can reply T for more time, and you can reply S to check your status. And so receiving that message is important because that message allows them to reply to at any time to be able to activate any of the other interactive features. Down here is what we call our status update positions. This is the automation of the queue system and very important for social distancing. It creates the interval of time and space between customers as they come into the building. And from a performance perspective, this is vital in terms of keeping your throughput optimized. By notifying customers before it's their turn, especially when you're dealing with virtual queuing, customers could be quite a distance away from where they're going to be summoned to. So this gives a customer a heads up that they're next. And by the time they are served, they're pretty much within proximity. It keeps everything moving smoothly. And then there's the transfer message. And the transfer message is vital for customer journeys that require support across multiple departments. In this case, you might have a customer who comes in and needs to see customer service. Maybe they have an exchange. That's their initial queue that they go into. When they're done with that queue, customer service can transfer them over to the cashier. So that way they can get in line to purchase whatever products they might have, keeping the flow of customers moving through the store. Now the next message is the L message or leave message. When customers reply L, they're leaving the queue. So in this case, Brandon, you have left the cashier's queue or cashier's line. To get back in line, use the virtual lobby. And so this updates the customer and acknowledges that they are removed from the line. Arguably the most important interactive message to customers is the status message. The status message alleviates the anxiety of waiting in line, particularly waiting in a virtual queue. Unlike a normal waiting line, where you're standing with a group of people, you have a pretty good idea of what your position is because you're behind somebody. In a virtual waiting line, you might be a few people, you might be around absolutely nobody. And in the case of social distancing, that's what we prefer folks to wait in their car. However, they don't have a visual cue to understand where they are in line or if they even are still in line. So their ability to check their status by replying S puts them at ease, and they have all the benefits of not being standing in line and being able to have the autonomy to do what they want to do while they're waiting. So for example, Brandon, you are number 15 in line for the cashier. You'll receive a text when you are third in line. Reply L if you have to leave the line. So very simple and straightforward, and at any point in time, customers can reply S and find out what their position is. Very important for peace of mind and key for customer satisfaction. So reply T, which will enable a customer to request more time, is a twofold advantage. One, it continuously provides throughput. In other words, we're not going to be waiting for a customer who isn't ready. Once a customer replies T, they move back 4 places in the queue, and the next person or the next 3 or 4 people move forward. So there's a continuous flow. The other advantage is that if customers can buy more time, they'll remain in line longer. So it lowers your rate of abandonment. So overall, it's a win-win. So now we want to go down to what we call managed queues. And this is where you'll set up the queues that your customers are coming to visit. So for example, your services or departments. So in this case, a scenario I set up is a department store, Grants, and we have a number of queues. In this case, we have a queue to the virtual lobby. So think of this as to the first step in the customer flow when it comes to this retail experience. So the first step is they have to get in the building. So in this case, by getting into the virtual lobby, they'll then be in queue to be moved into the building according to the social distancing restrictions in your policy. Then once they're in the virtual lobby, they have a number of other choices as to where they're going. Now you can have one queue when they get into the building, for example, like shopping. But the problem with that is you'll run the risk of crowding and forming lines within the building. So in this case, I suggest that you break it out into a couple different queues. So for example, shopping is probably going to be the most prevalent queue that people are there for. But then you're also going to have people there for maybe some more complex services, such as customer service and exchange. And that can take a lot longer than, let's say, checkout. So the other thing is, how do we manage customers in terms of forming traditional lines with regards to checking out? So with our system, we've devised a way where you can either have a kiosk within the store just for checkout, where customers who are about to get ready to check out can enter their information into the checkout queue, continue shopping until they're notified. Or we also have a mobile web page that would be attached to the notification that brings them into the store. In other words, when they're invited in through the virtual lobby, there'll be a link, and that link will open up to a mobile web page with certain commands on it. So in other words, they can press a button that says checkout, and that then would put them in the checkout queue. They'll be able to see on this mobile web page what position they are in the checkout queue. And the goal here is to encourage them while they're waiting to continue shopping, because the longer they wait, the more they spend. And it also prevents congestion and crowding at the registers. So with our mobile web page, that's probably the most effective way to handle checkout. Now, folks without a phone, you can have digital displays throughout the store, and again, they can use a kiosk to put themselves in the checkout queue and then monitor their progress on the digital display. Or customers can actually text into to the system using a number or a code or a word like checkout, and that then would put them in the checkout queue, and they would be updated as to what their status is and when they would be called to be checked out. But probably the most important component of a retail environment is to prevent crowding, either in the form of waiting lines, and also we want to ensure throughput. The more customers in and out, the more revenue. So throughput's important. So one of the ways to really look at this is breaking down the types of customers you have, and then setting up queues that will facilitate the best possible outcome. So in the case of creating a checkout service desk, we're able to segment customers who are there for, well, maybe less revenue generating services, but more time consuming services. So putting a shopper who's checking out behind somebody who's doing an exchange It's going to create a great experience. It's also going to slow down the throughput of your shoppers going through the cash register. And again, we also want to be able to manage that flow through checkout, so we don't have any sort of potential for people to spread COVID. So the checkout, which traditionally is a challenge when we talk about retail and how we manage queues, because most of the time checkout isn't managed. In our case, there's a couple different options. One would be the ability for customers to actually text in either a code or a word to the system, and that would put them in line. And this is when they're in the store getting ready to check out. The other one is a couple kiosks throughout the store. When they're ready to check out, they put their name, choose the checkout queue and their number, or just their name. And then if there's digital displays throughout the store, those without a phone can monitor their progress on the display. But the other innovative way that we have is that when they get their initial opt-in message, they're going to have a link at the bottom of that message, and that link will open up to a mobile web page. And that mobile web page will have certain options or commands. And so, for example, one will be to check out. When they click that, it'll essentially put them in the checkout line. They don't need a text or anything. And they'll also be updated on that mobile web display as to what their position is. When it is time for their checkout, they will get a text message. But using the mobile web makes it a lot easier for folks to essentially engage with the system. And checkout's an important component that we have to think through. To ensure throughput, we also want to break out how customers leave the store. So in other words, shoppers who are our revenue generators, we really want them to be able to have a smooth journey through checkout. So we suggest segmenting your customers who are going to need customer service to do exchanges or other types of things that take up more time and can slow down the process and increase the wait time for your shoppers. So it's always a good idea to sort of break out the two groups. And then lastly, we have the no-show queue. And this is something that staff can use when somebody doesn't show up, but they're not really sure if they should delete them from the queue or what have you. So when they move them to the no-show queue, that customer will get a text that will say, Brandon, we have attempted to reach you multiple times. You have been removed from the line. So the customer is notified. If the customer shows up because there was some sort of confusion or emergency or problem, if they're in the no-show queue, you can't put them back in line. So that's a consideration for how we would manage queues within a retail environment. In setting up your queues, you'll just follow along here. Now, this particular field is to be able to have a longer description on the kiosk. However, when you're using it for interactive messaging, this would take up too many words. So this would be how the messaging would communicate regarding the queue. So Grants versus Grants Virtual Lobby. And then you're going to choose a standard queue. You can write a description as to what the queue is for if that's helpful to other staff. And then here would be your queue message. Here you're going to choose a color that helps different staff members to kind of quickly queue into what queue theirs is by color code. And then down here you have different options. You can disable queue message. You can hide a queue from a display, hide one from the kiosk. So for example, in this case, we would hide the no-show queue from the digital display as well as the kiosk. We don't want people getting into the no-show. That works outward. Now we're just going to skip down over the web portal settings to manage users. So your manage users is a multi-factor authentication, and you're click this button and you have essentially three roles: IT admin, who is like the super admin who can manage users and add users. Then you have the queue managers, who are the folks who essentially manage the queues, your staff. And then we have check-in users, and we can go over that at another time. That's more or less for supporting departments that have appointments that are arriving. Choose a queue manager, and they'll be required to have an email. And so you'll put in an email. And in this case, the way it's set up here is the IT admin can actually assign the password and the PIN number. Now, typically the way we have it set up for security purposes, assign the username and the email address. That will then send the user an email where they'll have to verify it's them. We'll open up another window. They'll input their own password and PIN number, authentication component. This is just set up right now for a demo where I can just put in the password and the PIN. And so once that is done, the queue manager can log in. First they'll log in with their credentials, and then they'll need to use their PIN to access the queue manager screen. And you can suspend users, for example, say someone goes on vacation or what have you, reactivate them. You can edit and delete. Very easy and straightforward.